Okay, so welcome to July's webinar, all about sales strategy, plan, and process. So for those of you who've not been to one of these before or haven't come across Hulock Consulting, we help sales professionals to improve their performance through training and coaching so that they can win more deals and generate more revenue. So obviously every business needs to sell, and lots of people within that business are involved in selling. If it's just a small company, it might be everybody actually gets involved in selling. In larger companies, there may be people who whose only job it is to sell, in which case we help those as well. And the idea is that as a result of it, you should be winning more deals and generating more revenue. My background is about 33 years experience in industry, 25 years in sales and sales management, and now 6.5 years as Hulock Consulting, teaching people how to do this better. So as I say, this week we are talking sales strategy and plan, and then sales process. So we're going to start with the strategy and the plan, because that's really where you need to start any thoughts around sales, right? So your plan is obviously what you're going to do, and that will obviously vary depending on what products you've got, who your customers are and such like. But even knowing what your product and your customers are, you still have lots of different ways you could go about selling to them. Not all of them will be as efficient or as effective as others. And so your strategy defines why you are going to do the particular activities that you are going to do. So in essence, your strategy has to come first. And from that, you have a plan. And you, particularly if you have lots of people involved, you want to have a process for how you go about doing it. So we're going to start with the strategy and say the plan generally just falls out of that. And then we'll look at the process in a bit more detail, which will help you in defining your plan. Okay. So what is a sales strategy then, right? So it's our approach to selling that the sales team, or whoever is involved in sales, means that they can take the products that you're selling and target customers in a meaningful, differentiated way. So it defines why you are doing what you're doing, right? So as I say, your plan is the activity that you do. Why you're doing that activity comes out of your strategy. It's obviously a very essential part of growing a business. Nobody has unlimited resources to go out and sell. And so you've got to use those to the best of your abilities. You also want to make sure that if there's different people doing it, that they're adopting a similar approach. The last thing you need is a bunch of customers all going, finding things that are being done differently with each of them. And equally, you want to apply the best approach to all customers. So if some people are doing things and another different group of people are doing things differently, right? Neither of them or not both of them can be doing things the best way. So you want to make sure that the best way is applied to everybody. And so you've got a consistent approach. And obviously your strategy needs to be understood and underpinned by your understanding of your customers and your market, to ensure that you do things in the right way. Okay, so that's why it's important. Okay, so now what is it involved now? So the first thing before you even write a strategy is to understand, why are you writing a strategy? If your company is brand new, it's kind of obvious because you've got to have something to start from. But if your company has existed for a while, you've got to ask yourself, why am I writing a strategy today? Right? What has changed to mean that I should be writing it now? Because that might be, well, sales are declining, or it might be that you've got a new product. It could just be that you've got a new sales director has come in and has got different ideas and wants to look at things differently, right? But there's got to be some reason to do it. There's no point changing something that works really effectively. So you want to sit down and say, okay, why are we going to build this strategy? What's changed? Right? What's happening in the world that's influencing activity that makes me think I need to do a different strategy? Right? So for the my business, I've spent most of the last 2 or 3 years trying to do things more remotely, trying to do things via social media. But when I look at when I'm being successful, I'm more successful when I go and talk to people, right? When I sit in front of people, talk about what it is that they need to do, and work flows from that, right? So my strategy is currently changing to actually go back to more face-to-face work, trying to, work with people to understand what I can do for them, rather than waiting for them to come to me, as I've tried for the last few years. So that's what's changed in my world, and therefore that's why I've got a slightly different strategy, going forwards. So when you're doing it, know why you're doing it. Okay. The next thing is, what are you actually selling? Now, might seem obvious to you, or you might think that you should know that anyway, right? But it's not always so clear. Obviously, if you own a fruit and veg store, it's fairly obvious you sell fruit and vegetables, right? If you've got a product, you need to obviously know what that product is, right? But you've also got to know how it works, how people use it, and such like. If you're selling a service, it's a little bit more complicated, because a service could be lots of different things. And particularly for smaller companies, there is a tendency to say, oh, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And you can end up doing a lot more things than you're actually fully competent at. And actually also, it dilutes the one things or the few things that you are really good at by trying to do lots of different things. So you've got to be clear in your head what it is that you want to sell, so that you can focus on those things. Then you've got to know why somebody would buy it, right? So people don't buy the product as such. They buy the value that it gives them, right? So if you have a product or a service, what's the customer going to be able to do as a result of buying it that they couldn't do before they bought it, right? And more importantly, why does that matter to them? So if they buy your product today, right, what are they going to do tomorrow that they couldn't do yesterday? And what difference does it make to them? So a simple example is, you buy a new, if you're a cake maker, for example, you might buy a larger cake mixer, which means that you can make more cakes in the same amount of time than you could previously, right? That means you've got more products that you can sell that you've created in a similar amount of time, right? So that means more money coming in as a result, right? So what is it that the customer is able to do as a result of buying your product that they couldn't do yesterday? And why does that matter? And why does that matter to them is a really important thing. An awful lot of salespeople will tend to forget why it matters, right? They expect the customer to work that out for themselves, and sometimes they can't do that, or they don't do it correctly. You've got to try and do that for them. Okay, so what does the market look like, right? There are hundreds of thousands probably of potential customers, particularly if you're selling to consumers. But even on a business-to-business basis, there are lots and lots of companies. So can you go and talk to all of them? Clearly not, right? So how are you going to focus your efforts? So are there particular sectors that you're going to target? So are there particular vertical markets that you'll work with? What types of companies are you going to go and focus on, right? Are they large companies? Are they small companies? Are they manufacturing companies? Are they service companies? What are they, right? What's the competition for you in that marketplace as well, right? So it's highly unlikely that you'll be the only person or the only company doing the things that you do, right? So who else is out there, and what makes you unique? Because at the end of the day, the customer buys what's unique about you. They buy your product because of why you're unique rather than someone else's. And if you cannot explain why you're unique, then it's going to be very difficult for the customer to choose you, right? Even if you come down to very simple products, even if you consider white envelopes, right? So white envelopes are pretty standard. The quality of the paper may vary, the different type of gum that's used to stick them down might vary, but in essence, they're broadly similar. So how are you going to make yours unique, right? So the easy and obvious one is the price, but actually there may be other ways that you can do it. It could be the number of that you buy in a packet. It could be the fact that you offer free delivery. There's lots of ways or things around your product that can make you unique that don't necessarily relate exactly to that product. So you've got to think, what are those? What is it that's unique? Why is my customer going to buy from me rather than anyone else? The next stage of the strategy is to think about your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Right. So it's a very important thing, because we tend to think about what we're good at and we tend to forget about the things that we're not so good at. But they're really still important, because we've got to try and minimize those or find a way around them or improve them. So our strengths, what are we really good at, right? If we're really good at something and we find that we get great results out of it, we probably want to do more of those things. So if we're very good talking face to face with people, we should be doing that more often. If, in my case, I'm not an expert in digital marketing, and so I probably don't do it very well, and therefore that's a weakness of mine, right? So actually trying to do more of that is probably not the right way of me going about doing things. What are my opportunities, right? Can I immediately identify some, right? Where are they? What do they mean, right? And then my threats, what are the things that could go wrong? Okay, so very simple things like a new competitor into the marketplace, or a complete recession, or another outbreak of COVID requiring us all to go into lockdown. All of those things could be a threat to your business. You've then got to think, oh, is there anything I can do about them, right? So there's not a lot that any of us can do about another lockdown. Hopefully one doesn't come along, but there's not a lot we can do. But understanding the competition and such, like, that's something that we can do on a regular basis. We can go out and understand what they're doing and see if we can mitigate the impact of what they do. Okay. So then we're going to go and look at some customers, right? So we want to go and have some idea of what a good customer looks like, right? So it's a really critical element of your strategy, right? It's understanding what your best customers are going to look like. So they will have a bunch of characteristics. And so obviously, if your business has existed for a while, you can go and look at your existing ones and say, which ones are really good for us, which ones aren't. What are the similarities about the ones that are good? So there are sort of characteristics like, geography is a really important one, right? So for my business, there's no point in me really trying to sell sales training to companies in Newcastle. They're far too far away for me to have a regular meetings with them or have really meaningful discussions. Everything would have to be done online, and that's obviously more difficult to build relationships with them. So geography is a very important factor for a lot of people, right? How far away is your customer? Just the simple time it takes to go and meet with them, mitigates you against going too far. So geography is one. How big the company is might be another important factor. If you're a small company, my view is that small companies like dealing with small companies, large companies like dealing with large companies. So the size of your customer might have an impact. Where are the management decision makers located, right? So there may be an office near to you, right? So geography is winning there, but the decision makers might be based elsewhere. So obviously I've done a lot of work in the oil industry in the past. So some of the companies that I've worked for, they might be an obvious place for me to go back to talk to about training. But a lot of those decision makers are based in Houston. That makes it very difficult for me to go and promote my work to them, simply because of the time and distance between us. So the characteristics of your good customer are really important to identify. Then you want to go and say, okay, if I've got those characteristics, who meets those criteria, right? So what are those customers, right? What do we then know about them? What can we see their issues might be? What do we need to know about them? Who do we know there, right? How are we going to approach them? So what is going to be our way of making contact with them? Can we just walk up to the front door and ask them? Can we meet them through networking meetings? Can we meet them through Chamber of Commerce events? Can we meet them at exhibitions? How are we actually going to go and make contact with them such that we can progress our ideas with them? Okay. The next thing is, why will the customer care about what it is that you've got, right? So what are the likely problems that they might be facing that you're going to be help to solve for them, right? How can you see that they might have those problems? One of the great difficulties for me selling sales training is that actually there's nothing that really shows me what issues people may have that requires sales training. Until you can see, say declining sales, it would be almost impossible to recognize it in another company. So I have to just sort of approach people in the hope that they see that that's a need. But in lots of other places, you might start to be able to see things that imply that people have got problems that you might be able to solve for them, right? So it's really important that you try to see what are those things that you can do. So then how do you go and find out who's got those, and how do those problems impact the customer, right? So if they impact them in a really big way, then they're going to be desperate for a solution. If they're only impacting them in a small way, it might not be something that they need to do right now. It might be something they'll happily do in the future, but they may keep putting it off because it can always be done in the future. So you have to understand what is going wrong in a company, what is likely to be going wrong potentially, and how does that impact them, and how do they go about solving them in the way that you can help them with. Okay, then really important thing to talk about, and I talked about this in a webinar a few months ago, is why change, right? So for any business, they're existing today and they're doing things today. And if you want them to buy your product, you have to persuade them to do things differently. Because if they buy your product and don't do things differently, they're not going to be using your product. Right? I hope that makes sense. It's if you carry on doing the same thing, there's no reason to buy something new. So in order to justify the buying something new, you've got to say, okay, we're going to have to do something differently, right? So we're going to have to change. So why would they change, right? What's their motivation for doing things differently? And if you can find that motivation for somebody to do things differently, then you've got a great way of, going in and selling a new product to them or whatever. So for example, about 2 years ago, I think it was, there was a regulation brought in that all landlords had to do a electricity test of their properties on an annual basis, and when any tenancy agreement changed. So if one group of tenants left and another group of tenants went in, they had to do this particular type of electrical test, which meant they had to employ an electrician to do it, which meant the electricians, all of a sudden were able to say, we've got a new product or a new service that we can provide because we can come and do this test for all these landlords. So the motivation for the customer to change was regulations, right? They were obliged to do this by the government, and therefore they had to change the way they worked. And therefore it was very straightforward for electricians to come in and say, we can help you to resolve that issue by doing this test for you, right? Now, not all of us are so lucky that the government imposes regulations that require these things, but there's got to be some motivation for your customer to change. It might just simply be the growth of the company. As a company grows, they have different requirements, and the processes that they used when they were a small company are no longer appropriate for when they get bigger, and therefore that requires them to do things differently, right? So you've always got to try and identify what's the reason to change, okay? And then the last thing that you want to be able to do is how can you prove that you can deliver what it is that you say you're going to deliver, okay? So that might be, you might need to demonstrate the product. It might mean that you need to provide, you know, references from somewhere else that you've done this work in the past. But what is it that you are, how can you demonstrate that you can actually do what you say you're going to be able to do? Because everything that's come up to this point has always been driven by the emotional needs of the customer. But at some point they're going to go and say, okay, prove to me that you can do it, because my logical brain requires me to validate what you're saying. And so we need to provide that proof at that point. Okay. So all of that, as I say, builds your strategy. Then you need to sort of put that into a plan, which is who's going to do what, who's responsible for what, how are you going to measure success, right? And that really sort of, how you go about doing that is probably more defined by your process, which is what we're going to come on to next. Before we do, are there any questions about the strategy?
Hi, Tim.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. Obviously, if you plan growth within your company, your strategy should change with that. So say your target customer is living in Surrey, for example, but you plan to grow the company out, that location would obviously change, right? Your customer would change.
Yes, you've got to go, but you want to identify where that growth is going to come from. So it could be, well, it comes from growing the geographic area that we are covering, but it might be by taking on new product lines in order to sell, to having a different set of products to sell, or it might be just different customers within the area that we're doing. But that's what you've got to decide as, you know. So if you're targeting growth, that's a reason to have a new strategy. But absolutely, you've got to then say, where is that extra revenue going to come from, right? What are those groups that we're going to go and target as a result? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the sales process then. So these are the activities that you're doing on a general basis in order to drive people along. And obviously it should be underpinned by your strategy. But although the actual process itself is fairly generic, it will be the activities that go into it, which are obviously part of your plan, will be driven by the strategy. So if you actually Google sales process, you'll see all sorts of, you know, weird and wonderful diagrams, you know, lots of colors, lots of flows. It tends to complicate things to my mind. You know, particularly, you know, this one up here, you know, lots of different flows, different size boxes or different shaped boxes, different colored boxes. Do you really need anything that complicated? My gut feeling is that you don't. We'll go through a very simple sales process, and then we'll actually make it even simpler when we look at how we go about building it. Okay, so this is my simple sales process, and we'll go through each stage of the process in a minute. So the first thing is customer research. What's some general information that we can find out about all of our customers and our customers in specifically, right? Then we look at their needs analysis. So what is it that they need, right? Can we identify a need for our product, right? We can't be certain that they absolutely need our product. So at that point, we then go and validate what it is, whether or not they need it, right? So we go through a long validation stage where we ask them questions, they tell us what they need, and hopefully it still means that they need our product. So at the end of that, we're able to then give them a proposal. We then present that proposal to them. That presentation may involve other elements. So it may involve the proof that you can do what it is that you're doing. It may involve a demonstration of the product. It may involve a tour of your facilities, whatever it is, but there's some element of a presentation. At some point, there may be some negotiation, give and take between both sides, and then close, right? Shake hands, deal done. Let's go and deliver, okay? Now, I've presented it as a linear process. The reality is it's more of a circular process. So we start with our customer research, we go around the loop, we close the deal, but we don't want to just walk away then. We want to continue to engage with this customer. So we are continually researching them. We are continually looking at their needs such that we are continually trying to understand how we can drive business from them, all right? So we're constantly looking at that, okay? So let's look at each of those phases of the process and see what we're doing, okay? So customer research, basically trying to answer what's the customer doing in general terms that might make them or might make us think they need our product, right? So what's the customer doing? Where are they doing it, right? Who do they work closely with? So some companies have preferred suppliers, right? If that's one of your direct competitors, that might make them difficult for you to work with, right? What's their financial position? Have they got lots of money in the bank? Are they constantly scrimping and saving, right? All those things are going to make it difficult for them to potentially buy new products. What's their strategy? Yeah. What is it that they're trying to do? Where are they trying to get to in the future, such that you might be able to piggyback on and sell your products as a result? Do they conform to a good customer, right? What do we know about them at this point that allows us to say, yeah, that we think they could be a good customer? So we're looking for some basically general information. And I would suggest that I tend to use the good customer analysis as the way of defining what it is that I'm looking for. So I want to try and answer all the questions in there as much as I possibly can to be able to be sure that this is a customer that I want to try to work with. It may be that they want to work with me today, it might be tomorrow, it might be next week. But I want to make sure that they're roughly the sorts of company that I want to work with. So we're basically doing some general background research on them. Once they qualify through that stage, we then want to go into our needs identification. Can we determine any specific needs that they have, right? So, maybe they're just hiring 10 new people, right? So if they're going to be hiring 10 new people, they're going to need office space for them. They're going to need, potentially computers for them. They're going to need, desks for them. Very simple ideas there, but if there are ways that we can identify these things, then that will be a great way of identifying them. Can we guess at needs based on our experience? So can we look at a company and what they're doing and say, actually, there's another company that I've seen over there that is very similar. I know they need this product, so maybe this company here needs this product, right? It's only a hypothesis, but then that will be a great thing. It's a reasonable assumption to make, right? Are there analogs that we can use and such like? And then lastly, will they tell us about their needs? So if you go on most companies' websites, they'll have news features. Public companies will have presentations that are made to investors. A lot of those may give you ideas about things that they would need. They may issue tenders. So going and looking in places where tenders get issued and published to might tell you things about their needs. You may not be wanting to directly respond to the tender, but you may be able to look and infer from what it is that they are saying in there that there are other things that they need that you might be able to help with. So it's very difficult sometimes to always identify the things that they need. But the more that you can understand that somebody has got a need that you can help them with, then the better it is the conversation you're going to have when you go to talk to them. So the next stage is the going to talk to them. So the validation stage. This is where we go and check whether our guesses and hypotheses are correct. Do they actually need what it is that we think that they need? And obviously we do that by asking questions. So we ask questions, we try to identify all the needs that they have. We try to identify what that means to them, what the issues are that it's driving them, what the impact of those needs are, those issues are. And then from there, we can develop some ideas that we can sell to them, right? There's also internal work that you need to be doing, right? You've got to make sure that you can actually deliver against the ideas that you want to sell them, and that you can deliver it profitably, right? There's no point turning around and saying, oh, well, this customer wants to be able to buy X, Y, and Z, and we can, but they can have only got a certain amount of budget, which means that we lose money. That's not a good deal for anybody. So you've got to make sure that you can do it well. And, obviously at this point, you want to make sure they've got the budget, right? So there's lots of things that you need to validate through this process, but making sure that you fit, that understand what they need, and they can afford to pay for what it is that you will be delivering to them are obviously fundamental in there. From there, we then generate a proposal. So we use all the information and knowledge that we have, make sure it answers all the needs that you've identified, make sure it meets your own internal requirements, and ensure that it meets your customers' expectations. So you're going to set out, here's what it is you're trying to achieve. Here are the things that are stopping you from achieving it. Here are the features of the product that we're going to sell you that are going to help you. Here's the value of that to you for when you implement them. And here's the proof that we can do it. That's what your proposal sets out. Okay. I've seen an awful lot of proposals in my lifetime that talk all about your product, right? Your proposal needs to start with all about the customer and what it is that they're trying to do. So the presentation then comes after that, where you're presenting the solution to the client, you're presenting the proof that you can do what you're proposing, and you're answering the customer's questions. For a lot of people, you might make a presentation early in the sales process. So in the validation stage, you may make a presentation then. Now, that's perfectly fine that you're presenting your product. The problem with an awful lot of people is that they will make that presentation and expect the customer to work out why they should use the product. And that's not, you shouldn't expect them to be able to work that out for themselves. You should be using that presentation as a means to understand the company's needs before you go any further. Right, so you just do that presentation. It's what I call a marketing presentation. It's a generic one. It's there to stimulate the conversation, to get them talking to you. The presentation at this point is a sales presentation, and it should be focused exclusively on this customer and what it is that you're going to do for them. So then we go into negotiation. Obviously, if you've reached this stage, that generally means that the customer wants to buy. If nobody negotiates with you, I don't think, unless they actually want to buy from you, because otherwise they're wasting everybody's time. So if you get to this stage, right, your mindset should be changing slightly. At this point, you should be starting to try to find, the common ground between you that enables you to finalize a deal, right? So it involves give and take. And it actually sometimes, particularly as an account manager or a salesperson, involves give and take from both sides, and you're the person in the middle. So when you go and talk to the customer, you are representing your company, and you're trying to persuade the customer to move towards you. When you then take that position back and go and talk to internally in your company, you're then representing the customer to your company, and you're actually trying to get your company to move a little bit closer towards the customer, right? So you have a very different role at that point in sales, because you're trying to move both sides closer to each other. And both sides are obviously trying to get the best deal for themselves. Your role is to move them closer and closer, and therefore it requires give and take. It's really important that you work, particularly in a larger company that you're working with, the technical team, the financial team, the legal team, and compliance team to make sure that the deal that you're putting together complies with everything, all the rules and regulations that you have. You work with the technical team to make sure that you can actually do what you say you're going to be able to do. Salespeople have a tendency to promise an awful lot and not always be able to deliver on that, particularly when you go and talk to large companies. So you do need to make sure that you can deliver what it is that you're going to do. And then when you come out of that, right, you basically have a deal that everybody's happy with, and therefore closing should be the easiest thing that you get to do. It's really just about getting the paperwork signed and delivering the product. There shouldn't be anything more to do at that point. The reason a lot of people don't like closing or find it difficult to do is that they've not done all the work that's required up to that point. They haven't cleared out all of the objections. They haven't made sure that the customer's completely happy with everything. And if you haven't done that, then the customer isn't actually ready to close. So that's why it's difficult, is because they're actually not ready. So is that all the steps in the process of pretty much need to be followed. There are times when the customer comes to you, right? So they almost come to you in this validation stage and say, we'd like to buy your product. Now, I would always suggest that you go back and ask them, why do you want it? What is it that you're trying to do? So do the research on them, do their needs analysis. It's generally much quicker for you to do, but I would always recommend doing it. Understand why your customer's doing what they're doing. First of all, it means you can be certain that you're going to sell them the right product, rather than something that they think they need that they might not, right? It might be that they need more than they're asking for, right? If you don't understand what's driving their needs, then you're potentially not actually selling them what it is that they really need. And that's obviously never going to be a good thing going forwards. So always, if your customer comes to you, go back and do the research and the needs analysis. As I say, it should be able to be fairly quick, which is why, sometimes, none of these stages take the same amount of time. But I would say sometimes you might need to go back. Sometimes you'll get to negotiation and, you'll learn some information that means you need to go all the way back to needs analysis and validation in order to ensure that you've got all the information that you need, right? And certainly they don't take all them out at the same time. Any questions about the sales process? Okay, we'll move on. So in terms of building a sales process, I actually try to make it even simpler than that 7-stage process. So I actually split it into 4, right? And I call them suspect, prospect, opportunity, and sale. So suspect is, I think there might be an opportunity for me to sell my product to this customer. Prospect means I know that I can sell my product to this customer. The opportunity means I've made a proposal to that customer, and the sale is I've done the deal. Okay, so we can map the 7-stage process to our 4-stage process quite easily. So a suspect is our research and needs analysis, where we come out of it going, we think this customer wants what we've got. Prospect is validation. So we come out of that stage saying, I know that this customer needs our product. Right. We then make them a proposal and a presentation. So we know we've got a very definite opportunity. We can put it down in writing what it is that we're going to do for them. And then we go through the negotiation and close process where we deliver the sale. Okay. Now, in terms of activity, there's a lot more activity done up here and a lot per opportunity and a lot less as we go through. Obviously, the number of potential deals is far greater as we, at the top of the process than as we go through. So we have a lot more suspects, less prospects, less opportunities, and less sales, right? So as we go through, we start to lose them. And you should have a way of weeding out ideas and prospects that are never going to get to the opportunity stage, so that you're focused, on opportunities that you've got the greatest chance of winning. Okay. So maybe we want to build our sales process, right? We're going to start by defining our macro stages. So that's, in my world, suspect, prospect, opportunity, and sale. You might want to make them slightly bigger. You want to define the purpose of each of those stages. Then you're going to define the main activities that are done in each of those, including the information that needs to be gathered, any documents that need to be created. So what are the things that you do in order to move an opportunity from the first idea through into the next? And then define the criteria for the opportunity to move to the next stage. So in order for something to go from suspect to prospect, what are the things that you need to know? Can you rank all of those things in a way? Can you say, yeah, I've definitely know who it is we need to approach? You need to be able to define that need in some level and such like, right? And then you should want to try and use some metrics to try and track performance and progress, so that you know what works, right? So what are the things that you're doing that are generating lots of ideas? What are the things that are not making so many, right? So that you start to do more of the things that are worthwhile doing, right? Always make sure you include the sales team in building the process, right? So the people who are actually out there doing things, the idea would be that you brainstorm all the activities without ordering them. So literally write down on pieces of paper all the things that you do, right? And only then start putting them into boxes, right? Make sure you work through both good sales and bad sales to see what was worth doing and what wasn't worth doing. It's also worth interviewing friendly buyers to understand the process from their perspective, right? What did they see as useful? What did they see as, oh, I don't know why they did that with us, right? Always try and find out what they're doing. I would say that you starting with a generic process is probably the best thing, and then working out what works for you, review it with the team, and continue to refine and adjust it, right? So as you make sales, think, okay, what worked well in this one, right? Okay, let's do more of that. As you lose things, okay, what did we not do? Maybe we should be doing that. So it should never be a fixed in stone process. We should always be trying to understand more as we go through it. Okay. It's also important to think about it from the customer's perspective, right? So anyone who's been on these before, you'll have seen this, I'm sure. So we've got our initial approach in some form or other. How do we find that customer and go up to them at the start? We have a series of meetings. We make them a proposal. We have some negotiation, and we shake hands on the deal at the end, right? It's worth overlaying the two so that you see how they interact with each other, right? So you can see negotiation and close pretty much align with each other. We've got our proposal and presentation are aligned with proposal. But all that initial work with the customer, right? The initial approach and all the meetings all come in the validation stage. The customer research and the needs analysis all need to happen before we ever go and talk to the customer. Okay, so all of that needs to be done. If you go to a customer not knowing why they might need your product, you're wasting everyone's time, and you really don't want to be doing that, right? So you want to be throwing out customers that are never going to buy your product at this stage, so that when you make that initial approach, you know what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it, and you've got a good chance of progressing. And in terms of the effort that goes into each of these stages, right, I would say definitely more needs analysis than customer research. Customer research is really about clearing that initial hurdle to say, yeah, they could be a good customer, but actually we still need to understand the needs. Validation could be, way bigger than this. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 years sometimes to get through this stage, right? Proposal, again, can be a variable amount, but again, it should be specific to that particular customer. So you've got to take all the information that you've learned in this validation stage and put it into this proposal. What you shouldn't be doing is just taking, the proposal that you wrote last week and just changing the name of the company and sending it out again. Each company is different, and so your proposal should be different. Your presentation is obviously a presentation of the proposal, so ought to be smaller than the effort should be smaller than that. Negotiation again could be a lot bigger, could be a lot smaller. It depends on the size of the deal, but close really should be that small, right? It really should just be saying we're all happy with the deal as it's proposed. Let's shake hands and move on. If you're making it bigger than that, then you're clearly not doing everything right further up in the process. Okay, any final questions? I will stop the recording shortly, so if anyone wants to ask questions off air, you can do. But are there any questions at this point?
Hope you can hear me. I have a bit of a noisy background.
No, that's
so
okay.
sorry about the noise. I don't really know if I have my question well formulated, but I think what I'm wondering is, what do you do when you're in a stage with a client where they don't really know what they want? They might want many different things, but you can't really do all of them at once. So how do you figure out, do you have any tips on how to figure out what is the best thing to start with?
It's just more questioning, really. I think you've got to try and see. So there's two elements that go into, if the customer needs a number of different things, there's how simple is it for us to do each of these different things, and what difference does it make to you for doing each of them. So if it's really simple to do and it's really important that it gets done, that's probably the first thing you want to do. If it's really difficult to do and it really doesn't make much difference to their business, that's probably the last thing to do. So it's almost, you can almost do a Boston Square of importance and ease of doing, and plot them all on there and see what it is that which ones come out in there. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else? I will